We have food up on the space station. And one day I felt a little bit like Sir Isaac Newton or something because I was holding this green apple. I was actually floating it in space next to myself. And it made me think, how did it get from the tree to where I was going 17,500 miles an hour with me around the world? And how much energy did that take? In the next 45 minutes, we're going to plow into how we use energy to feed all 8.2 billion human beings around the world every day, and how energy fuels food. Justin Rose is president of Lifecycle Solutions and Supply Management at John Deere. Aaron Wetzel is vice president of production and precision agriculture at John Deere. With these two experts, I'm going to talk about exploring fueling food and the energy behind every bite. This is On Energy. So, gentlemen, welcome to On Energy.
Thank you, Chris. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Really looking forward to the conversation today, and thanks for having us.
I grew up on a farm. It was a family grain farm. At our peak, we grew about 500 acres of corn or beans. And I spent my teenage years sitting on tractors, tilling the fields, everything from the initial plowing right through the disking and the harrowing, and then the planting, and then the cultivating in the summertime and the harvesting in the fall. And eventually loading the corn or the beans into the transport trucks to take it to market. We all regularly enjoy the convenience of a meal, but behind every bite that we take is this almost invisible, intricate web of energy, from the farm all the way to the grocery cart to the dinner table. Every step of the food supply chain demands energy. Justin, Aaron, let's start at the beginning. Can you just explain, as if I was like the luckiest class of sixth graders in the world, just explain what you do and how you work together to ensure that the food gets from the farm to our tables?
Well, let me start by saying Aaron and I are a closely knit team. In the most simple way, I would say he and his team decide what John Deere is going to do, the products, the services, the capabilities we're going to build, where we're going to spend our R&D and our capital to help farmers do more with less. And my organization and my team helps get that to market. And our goal is to get technology in the hands of every customer, to find a way to make it affordable, accessible, and adaptable so that they can use it for their needs. Because, Chris, as you know, growing up on a farm, every farm's unique. Every farm has its own needs, and every farm and every farmer is looking to optimize their operations to create the most output with the least inputs and in the most sustainable way.
It's interesting that the two of you have pivotal roles in how the food gets there. So with Aaron looking at what the company ought to be doing, and then yourself, Justin, in once they've done the job and created the product, then how you get it to market and how you give the farmers and the customers the tools to optimize the process. But that's my thumb summary of what you just said. Aaron, what did I get wrong?
No, I think you said it very well. But in the production system organization that Justin referenced, where we're trying to decide what's next for us to determine how we can create more value for customers. Things like narrowing windows for being able to plant the crop at the right time or harvest it at the right moment. Helping them manage complex operations. As we've seen farms grow in size over the past couple of decades, those larger operations, you have a lot of things happening, and being able to manage that complexity in a very critical moment in time as you're either trying to get the seed in the ground or the harvest completed requires a lot of assistance and help and key decisions being made. And customers are also focused on their costs. They're looking for ways to do more with less. And our teams are out there working with them to better understand what are those opportunities that we can pursue with a combination of our equipment and technology.
Yeah, thanks. Just picture that I'm the kid in the back of this classroom, and I'm raising my hand right now to you, Aaron, saying, so, okay, you've been with the company for 35 years. What is John Deere's mission? Looking at all those things you talked about, what's John Deere's mission here in 2025? And specifically like in terms of sustainable agriculture and reducing the energy footprint? What do you see as your role in that?
We've got 8+ billion people on the world that we need to be able to feed, clothe, and fuel. And that requires our producer customers to be able to continue to increase their output. But we need to do that in a way that is positive for our environment, positive for their bottom line. And what's great is both of those can be accomplished through technology and equipment solutions that we're bringing to our customers. I use one example of the past few years that we've launched an innovative solution in spraying for our growers called See and Spray. And I equate this back to when I was a kid growing up in a farm in central Illinois, where at that period of time we walked beans. And Chris, you probably did the same thing to kill the weeds through the beginning of the growing season.
Hey, let me interrupt, Aaron.
Yeah.
We had a 5-acre plot near my dad's barns, and I think it was more a lesson in humility than anything. But my dad had me go hand weed all of the goldenrod, all of the wild mustard that was popping up in that field, and it was a couple days' labor. But I would have been very happy with something a little more technologically advanced than just my own hands.
Exactly. And that was my same approach as a 8-year-old in the middle of a soybean field and trying to hook weeds. I always said, why can't there be like a laser beam that would go down the field and actually just kill the weeds and keep the beans in place? And what's exciting in the 35-year career that I've had at Deere and in agriculture, we have technology with See and Spray that's actually doing that today. We're driving through the field at 15 miles an hour and utilizing, the latest in computing technologies, high-speed cameras, edge computing capabilities, and discerning weeds from crop and actually killing the weeds through a really advanced spray solution. And that's enabling customers to reduce their costs in herbicides by nearly 60%. Not only does it help their bottom line, it's less chemicals we're putting in the field. So it helps support some sustainability work in less chemicals being placed in our fields.
And Chris, that might all sound like it's really neat technology that is optional, that maybe some farmers will use that, maybe some won't. But I think Aaron and I, and our vision of the world at John Deere, is that technology is going to be required at scale to optimize and to deliver on that mission of producing more with less. Sometimes I ask a question of people I meet that aren't as familiar with the industry, and the question's, guess how many soy and corn plants are planted every year in the United States alone? Individual stocks of plants. And I won't put you on the spot and ask you to do it, but the answer is 12 trillion. 12 trillion plants in the United States alone. Add Canada, add Brazil, add Europe, add India, add Africa. You clearly are going to be in the 50+ trillion range of individual plants. Now, why is that important? That's important because there's proof through field trials that you can get up to 3 times the amount of yield from an individual plant when you take care of the plant and its individual needs. So when you look at it and you treat it exactly with the right amount of nutrients, you deal with any specific pests or fungus or weeds that it might be dealing with, you get it the right amount of water, et cetera, et cetera. And so imagine a world where you could triple the output of the crop production system by applying technology, by dealing with each plant individually. We could do that by all walking the fields, but if we can actually take that to scale with equipment that is robust, that can articulate and execute at incredible precision. When we talk about planting, we are getting the seed, each individual seed, into the furrow at exactly the right depth so that it will emerge the best it possibly can. And doing that at a pace that would blow your mind. And that's transformational for the world, because you either get, in that case, a lot more output with a lot less land, with a lot less inputs, with a lot less fuel and energy consumption, or you start to say, what are all the different ways we could use agricultural products? And by the way, today, food is just one part of that. Fiber for our clothes, fiber for housing, for dwelling, fuel, that gasoline for cars, sustainable aviation fuel for planes. Agricultural products go into all these different parts of modern life, And I think we have the opportunity to do that again in a way that is creating a lot more with a lot less.
Thanks. Let's just do one quick definition, and I think it falls under you, Aaron.
Mhm.
When you say precision agriculture, what do you mean?
I mean, the more precise placement of seed chemical nutrients, the more precise monitoring and control of the machines themselves as they go traverse through the fields. It's leveraging technology, primarily electronics, to be able to have that more precise control on them.
Okay, so rather than just tilling unnecessarily, planting plants that aren't going to grow, or not providing them with the nutrients or water that they need, by using high tech, we can almost more surgically try and feed each one of those 12 trillion plants in the US to be able to go through its natural cycle. Talking about productivity of the land and the push for maximum yield, is that changing as the technology gets better? And especially, how do you feel the emphasis on reducing the energy footprint of agriculture?
Yeah, great question. And if we think about over the past couple of decades, there has been a tremendous improvement in yield. And I'll talk more specifically to like corn and soybeans. And that's been primarily driven by advances in genetics. But we're starting to see now where the execution of the job, that precision application of the seed, the precision application of the chemicals and nutrients to foster the growth and development of that seed, the ability for us to place these 13 or 12 trillion seeds across the US in a very short window of time. And our planters have the technology to know exactly where every one of those seeds are. We're doing that in a window of opportunity that is narrower. So it's going to take less energy because you're doing it in a shorter period of time than we have done historically.
Just a sec. When you say a window of time that is narrower, what do you mean?
Oh, so, to maximize your growing season, you have a certain window to be able to get the seed planted in the ground to take advantage of the sunlight that's available over the growing season. And so if you miss that window, we know that for every week, for example, in the US, that we're late in getting that plant planted into the soil, it's a single-digit % yield loss. So timing of when the seed gets placed into the ground is extremely important for it to maximize its full potential that it has. And so there's where the investments in highly productive seeding solutions and highly precise seeding solutions is mission critical for our customers to be able to take advantage of that narrow window and maximize the yield for their crops.
And tie that, if you would, please, to the energy footprint.
Mm-hmm.
I may be self-evident, but just explain it the way you see it.
Yeah, I think, we're, as a grower, looking for ways to do more with less. And so if I've got a more productive machine that is able to do the same job, plant that 80 acres in a third of the time or the half of the time that it used to take, that's less energy I have to expend being able to make that happen. It's fewer people that I'm going to need to employ to make that happen. And so then the general context of the energy involved in getting that seed put into the ground today versus in the past, we're doing so much more efficiently and effectively than we have.
Maybe I can add a couple examples as well, because I agree. I think that energy is a critical factor. So if you go back 50 years, fuel was maybe 25% of the total investment that the farmer made every year in raising a crop. And by creating more productive equipment, larger equipment, more productive equipment, more fuel efficient equipment, that shrunk to 5 or 6% of their cost structure now. But that's not the only place you see energy. So that's a big gain. But you also think about the energy that goes in to make chemicals, the energy that goes in to make fertilizer. Those are extremely energy intensive crops. In fact, I believe that fertilizer production and fertilizer usage is the biggest CO2 emitter contributor on a farm. And so what can you do about that? Well, one of the technologies we have is called exact shot. And so as you're placing each seed, some farmers will choose to spray a little bit of fertilizer into the furrow as they go and they place the seeds. We've built a technology that's using cameras to time exactly spraying the fertilizer so it only hits the seed. So all the inch between the seeds is not getting sprayed. You reduce the amount of total fertilizer that you're putting down by 65, 70%. So that's a step. Then we go to see and spray, which Aaron talked about, where instead of broadcast spraying, so think about a 120-foot boom on the back of a sprayer going through the field at 15 miles an hour, coating everything with herbicide to kill the weeds. The vision that you'll see in the fields now, if you see one of the most cutting edge Deere sprayers, is it's still rolling through the field at 15 miles an hour, but instead of spraying chemicals everywhere, it's hitting weeds that are smaller than the camera lens on your iPhone, and only them. And so you're reducing the total amount of chemical consumption by, again, on the order of 60 to 70%. So there's energy savings throughout that entire value chain. One last one, you go to harvest. A big part, one of the biggest issues in harvest is combines sit idle. So you've now got a full load of grain sitting in the hopper of your combine. You need the grain cart to come by, or you have to go to the edge of the field to put it into the truck. Is there a way to optimize that? Well, yes, there is. If we could start to say, hey, we know what the density of crop is lying in front of the combine. We know how full our bin is so far. We can tell the truck exactly when it needs to pull up and meet us so that we don't have to pause our operations at all. And by doing that, you don't sit and run the motor of the combine. Today that might be 20% of the time the combine's in the field. In the future, that could be close to zero. And so I think when you think all the way from tilling the field to planting to spraying to harvest, there's energy consumption, of course, at every one of those steps, but real step changes that we're helping drive through the use of technology and optimization to make it less energy intensive.
Justin, at the intro, you'd mentioned that your, sort of get to market is a large part of what you focus on. If you could just clarify for the listeners, I've read somewhere that the pure agricultural part of providing food is on the order of like 3% of total global energy usage. But when you look end to end, all of the factors that are involved, it's a much bigger number, maybe as much as 30% of global energy consumption. And so can you just paint us a quick picture of that end-to-end picture, the cold storage and transportation and other things that people might not be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts upstream. So building the inputs, building the seeds, the chemicals, the nutrients, that's a big chunk of the overall energy intensity of agriculture. To your point, we then go into the field. It's the actual farming operations, driving tractors and other pieces of equipment around, is a relatively small portion of the overall energy consumption. But downstream of that, once you've harvested, it goes into a global supply chain that is incredibly expansive, collecting all of the grain off of those 12 trillion plants in the US alone, aggregating that, processing it into food. To your point, for the things that have to be stored and chilled, transporting them around and ensuring that you have total veracity of stability of temperature and continuation of that cold chain supply chain. There's a lot of energy downstream of that. And one thing that troubles me is a significant portion of food ultimately goes to waste. And so, every time I don't finish my meal, I feel a little ping of guilt because I know the amount of effort, the amount of energy, the amount of time and love really that went into producing that.
Yeah, I've read somewhere that like on the order of 40% of food that is produced in the US is wasted. It's interesting. If you look at the birth and death rates in the world, we're at 8.3 billion human beings alive right now. But it looks like we're going to peak at around 10 billion. But if we're throwing away, at least in Canada, United States, if we're throwing away 40%, that means we're already growing enough food for that portion of the world. So it's how do we collectively best address that particular part of the problem, not just doing all that advanced work, getting the seed, getting the fertilizer, getting the equipment, getting it planted, getting it harvested, but real end to end. And can you look at it? Now, I'm going to pose this to you, if I could, please, Justin. Look at it through the eyes of any of the people that are listening to this podcast walking down their grocery aisle. how is John Deere approaching it, but also how should we collectively be looking at the efficiency of the food process?
Well, I think it presents a huge opportunity. And so, as you said, if 40% of the food's being wasted today, we should be able to feed the world's future population with the output we have. There are a couple additional considerations, though. I think that the average Indian citizen, the average African citizen, probably would like to have a more variety in their diet. They'd probably like to have more meat consumption. They'd probably like to have, higher quality food. And so we believe that food consumption will continue to grow, or agricultural consumption for food will continue to grow, even if the population levels off. Because there's a lot of people that don't have the benefit of sitting down to a spectacular Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas meal. The other thing I would call out is there's massive opportunity in biofuels and other ways to use agricultural products. And I think we're just on the border of starting to innovate of how we can grow in a way that is secure for every country that has agriculture, that's much more sustainable than other processes of fuel and fiber production. There's a lot that can be achieved there, and I think we're going to see over the course of the next 5 or 10 years a lot of investment and a lot of time and effort to build that out.
Aaron, just a quick question. When you talk about biofuels, what do you really mean? What's biofuel?
Great question, Chris. We view biofuels as any fuel that's created from a plant feedstock. We think about ethanol produced from corn or sugarcane. You've got biodiesel, which is typically produced out of soybeans. And the opportunity
so
there.
Just like, how does that happen? How do you turn corn into ethanol or soybeans into diesel?
So there's a distilling process where you separate the sugars that creates the energy that enables us to be able to convert that into a fuel that's usable for our cars and trucks in the world.
So the sun shines down on the field. The natural process of growing corn or soybeans turn that sun into sugars, things with energy. And then there's some cracking or distilling process that then turns it into a fuel in the tractor itself.
Yes.
Cool. So it's almost like as long as you can make it efficient, it's like a form of solar energy.
Yes, it is.
Let's go back to just technology. And I think that, again, this is for you, Aaron, but a farmer has choices, right? Do I use the 50-year-old tractor that I inherited from my mom and dad that just burns, car gas, or do we try and do something more advanced, biofuels, which, of course, if you're spending energy to grow the biology that you're going to make fuel from, it's really hard to close that loop and make it actually work, or electrification. But a lot of farms maybe aren't in a place where there's significant electricity available. Maybe start with a simple question for you, Aaron. Is it possible to have an energy self-sufficient farm?
It's a great question about energy self-sufficiency. I believe in some degree, yes, there is that potential in the future. And it's a combination of multiple fronts, I believe. Over the past few years, we've seen an energy transition taking place across the economy. You mentioned biofuels and electrification, and we're seeing those same phenomenon hitting our customers in the agricultural space. And we've been making investments as a company to help address those growing trends that we see as customers are looking for options that they want to be able to do things differently. Electrification is one of those examples. And Chris, you mentioned it. Not every farm has the grid power to be able to support a battery electrification solution, but there are some that see opportunities there. It's also being driven from some of the consumer markets looking for more sustainable solutions in how the crops are being grown. And primarily in orchard, vineyard, high-value crop space, we see a more immediate demand for electrified solutions. It also fits into the technology. As we look at battery capabilities, you get to a certain size of machine where batteries actually are economically viable and can provide good value to the customers in terms of performance. As you move up into much higher horsepower capabilities, like we'll use our largest tractor we manufacture today, it's an 830 horsepower four-wheel drive tractor. That's not an option for a fully electric machine. The size of the machine would be larger than the office building I'm probably sitting in. Maybe not that big, but still significantly large, and just the economics wouldn't be there, and the grid power is not there. So there's a lot of reasons for it to not work. But for the large customers, biofuels is something of particular interest, and we're beginning to make investments to further develop biofuel capabilities for our growers. Ethanol being one of those, and we've shown in several examples an ethanol engine solution that has gotten a lot of interest from our growers in North America, but also in Brazil. And the interesting opportunity there is that the growers can use their own feedstocks to create that ethanol. They'll be used back into their operations. So back to, can they be fully self-sufficient? Yes, the feedstocks that are being produced start to produce the energy that then can be consumed back onto the farm. And we're beginning to see that in Brazil, for example, with our sugarcane growers and even corn producers making investments in ethanol capabilities to use it back in their operations, lowering their cost, but also being able to have a more sustainable solution for the long term. So a transition is coming. We're continuing to see how that evolves, and we're making investments to be able to help growers have that choice in their own operations and works best for them.
Looking at biofuel and so growing a crop that can then be put into the tractor, or looking at electrification, and I don't know which of you to ask, but how's that going in proportion to the overall food production, and where do you think it's leading? And obviously, you're both John Deere,
Mm-hmm.
but there's lots of other tractor making and equipment making companies that you're in competition with that hopefully will take us in a direction that is going to make better use of energy.
So, Chris, we say all the time, the pace of change is faster than it's ever been, and it'll never be this slow in the future. And I think that applies both to things like electrification, the usage of biofuels, and autonomy. I think personally, in 5 years, we'll have tens of thousands of electrified tractors running around. Hopefully, most of them will be John Deere. But as you said, there's a very active, competitive space out there. And I think that competition is pushing us all to do better and re-envision how we can actually make the idea of an electric tractor not just a different powertrain, but an improved product overall with more capabilities for the customer. On autonomy, it's such a fascinating question, because when you say autonomy or I say autonomy, I'm guessing many people think, okay, cool, we'll get the driver out of the seat of the cab. But it's much, much more than that. If you think about planting corn today, yes, you're steering a tractor many times through the field, but you're spending, I bet, more than half your time looking backwards, looking at each one of the individual row units, putting that seed down, stopping your tractor, getting out, digging a little bit into the soil to see if you're at the right depth and you're hitting the right moisture level of the soil that you're planting in. And so autonomy does, yes, it removes the driver, but it also has to do all of those other tasks because no one else is there to actually take care of that. And the promise of that then, when we get to a point that you can autonomously plant, what that means is you can plant at an incredibly high level of consistency and excellence. So today, when there's a labor shortage and you're hiring somebody, maybe even off the street, to work on your farm for 3 weeks to help you get planting done, who knows what the quality of that job is? Who knows how capable that operator is? Maybe you're putting your kid in the seat because you just need help on the farm to get the work done. In the future, when we have autonomous planting, when we have autonomous spraying, we have autonomous harvesting, you know that you're going to get a world-class job on all those dimensions. And again, that's another technology frontier that when we can unlock that, I think you're going to see an exponential adoption, not just linear or slower adoption.
I heard that one of you had a story talking about advancing technology and automation, about a farmer comparing maybe the reality of what they'd seen and the technology that's coming and the impact that can have, and them sort of welling up. I'm not sure if either of you recall that story, but if so, can you tell me about it?
3 years ago, when we were first bringing autonomy and demoing it with some early customers, of course, we were interested in how the machine performed, how many times it stopped, what the sensors were telling us, and so on, but also in really the impact it had on the customers' lives. And so we were not just looking at the data, we were actually interviewing the customers and trying to understand what they thought. And one of the most powerful moments came out with a gentleman who remarked that, during the really busy time of harvesting, when a lot of the tillage work is done as well, this was actually letting him have dinner with his family. And he said, I didn't think I was ever going to get to do that, to, spend time with my kids, to see my grandkids at the kitchen table in the fall, because I've always been so busy. And he actually started welling up, and it was an emotional event for him.
Yeah, it's great to get that direct feedback and to see that you're making an individual difference and not just improving processes and making sure that you're meeting your bottom line. It's nice to get that feedback. Justin, I have a question for you. Looking at it maybe through my dad's eyes, where he's now at the end of his farming career, he's already 91 years old. The changes that he's seen during his life and the production capability and the advancements that have been made in farming, in turning energy into food, across your experience of all the farmers that you work with and getting products to market, what do you see as the biggest changes? Maybe also looking at it from the perspective of the farmers themselves.
I think about this, think about my grandpa, and, if he was still here, what he would think about some of the things that we're building, that we're taking to market, that farmers are using these days. It is an amazing, amazing change. I was actually in North Texas with a farmer last week, and it was exactly the type of situation you're describing. An older gentleman starting to hand off the farm to his son, who was 20 or 21 years old. And they talked some about this. And the dad talked about when he started farming 40 years prior, it was in an open cab, manually steering a tractor through the field in the heat of Texas, operating a clutch, trying to get the implements to work right. And I think most fundamentally, kind of getting 40 shots at getting it right. If you think about each season as another opportunity to optimize and take what you learned in the season before, you get 40 tries in your life, and you try and do the best you can with that. And now the sun is now operating a newer piece of equipment that's got a cab, and by the way, a air floating seat, and can listen to great tunes with air conditioning. The tractor drives itself through the field. You still have to be there to be ready to take over, but much of the time you're actually focused on making sure the job's getting done well and checking your sensors. But I think most fundamentally, having the ability to learn not from your single accumulated life experience, but starting to benchmark against others, starting to understand what that technology means at a larger scale. We like to say we're going from 40 lifetimes to 40,000 lifetimes of intelligence. And so when I look forward, I think that's going to have the biggest impact of anything we can do. Yes, we'll continue to make the equipment better, but how do we aggregate and distribute the intelligence of how to optimize, of what the best practices are for your farm, for your soil, for your climatic patterns? There's a ton of value in that. And I think we're just at the frontier. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm really hopeful what that future brings. And I think if you're a 20-year-old and you're getting into farming right now, I think the world is all in front of you. The pace of change is going to be even greater than the past generation saw and the generation before that. So we should all hold on and enjoy the ride.
Up on the space station right now, the crews are growing crops just in an experimental way, because it's hydroponic. There's not dirt, there's not sunshine. You have to find a way to turn the solar powered spaceship and create an environment where plants will grow. Well, we're doing experimentation up there too, growing cress, growing the full cycle of flowering, where pollination, and getting that all to work. But I think in addition to feeding the 10 billion people on Earth, it's really interesting to think about how all those things we've learned, what your grandfathers and grandmothers have done, and my own, right through to how the very first settlers which is inevitably going to happen on the moon and eventually Mars, we'll be taking everything we've learned and feeling that same sense of pride watching their crops grow in an entirely new place. Pretty amazing moment in history. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the conversation today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Just want to finish with a couple quotes. There was a famous French writer and philosopher who went by the name of Voltaire, and he said, "To make the earth productive, we must enlighten the mind." That was back hundreds of years ago. And Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president of the United States and one of the founding fathers of the country, said, "Every discovery in agriculture is a permanent gain to society." And you two guys are examples of that. People have put your entire lives coming from agricultural roots through to trying to help build not just the equipment, but the systems that allow us to turn energy into nutrition and protein and food for people around the world. So thank you for your time, and thanks for being with me today. And just as I sign off, I want to remind everybody how important it is, like these two gentlemen have, to have your own personal dreams and to be making daily decisions to change who you are and to move closer to your own dreams. And most of all, to enjoy that amazing ride. Until next time, I'm Chris Hadfield on Energy.
Chris Hadfield on Energy is brought to you in part by Enbridge. For many decades, Enbridge has safely and reliably delivered the energy that helps power homes, industries, and communities. Today, they're investing in the energy systems that fuel people's quality of life. Life takes energy. That's why Enbridge is shaping a better energy future, because tomorrow is on. Find out more at enbridge.com.